The silence in our apartment had weight. It was a thick, woolen blanket smothering everything. The dust motes dancing in the late afternoon sun, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the steady, weary rhythm of Bruce's breathing from the living room. I stood in the kitchen doorway, watching him. He was sunk deep into the corner of our gray sofa, staring at his phone without seeing it. His graphic novel, the one that had once made his eyes spark with a frenetic energy, lay abandoned on the coffee table, a monument to the creative block that had settled over him like a shroud. The shadows under his eyes were bruises against his pale skin. My heart ached, a sharp, physical pain beneath my ribs. This was the third week. 3 weeks of this suffocating quiet, 3 weeks of him retreating into a place I couldn't follow. I'd tried being patient. I'd tried gentle encouragement. I'd tried just holding him. But it was like trying to fill a cracked vase, everything I poured in just leaked out, leaving him empty and me feeling useless. Then I remembered the pact. I'd scrawled it in my journal in a fit of desperate determination after his last bad spell, the words fierce and underlined twice, I will be the sun. I will drag him into the light, even if it burns me. Taking a deep, shaky breath, I closed my eyes. I pictured a switch flipping on inside me, a little internal stage light. When I opened them, I forced my shoulders back and painted a bright, wide smile on my face. I had to be bigger than the silence, brighter than the gloom. I practically bounced into the living room, the movement feeling alien and jerky in my own body. Okay, grumpy pants, I declared, my voice artificially chirpy. I clapped my hands together, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness. We're having an adventure. Get your shoes on. Bruce looked up, his beautiful, tired eyes clouded with confusion. An adventure? Celine, I don't know. I didn't let him finish. I crossed the room and knelt in front of his chair, taking his large, limp hands in mine. They were cold. I infused my voice with every ounce of playful insistence I could muster. Nope. No arguments. I've decided. We're going to that terrible, overpriced mini-golf place with the giant pink flamingo. And you, I said, poking his chest gently, are going to lose spectacularly. He stared at me for a long moment, and I held my breath, my smile muscles starting to ache. Then, a miracle. A ghost of a smile, the faintest crinkle at the corners of his eyes, touched his lips. It was small, but it was there. It was a crack in the fortress wall. Victory, sweet and heady, surged through me. The performance was working. The following days became a whirlwind of manufactured whimsy. I became a curator of quirky experiences. One night, I dragged him to a midnight screening of what was arguably the worst movie ever made. The theater was packed with rowdy fans, and when the plastic spoons started flying at the screen, I launched into the air with a delirious whoop, throwing my own with ridiculous fervor. I glanced at Bruce amidst the chaos. He was watching me, a bemused, actual smile on his face, and for a second, I didn't have to fake my own joy. Another morning, I woke him at 5 a.m., bundling a groggy but compliant Bruce into the car with a thermos of my truly terrible homemade coffee. We hiked up a small hill overlooking the city and watched the sun bleed orange and pink over the sleeping skyline. I chattered nonstop, pointing out silly shapes in the clouds, my voice the only sound in the crisp air. He was quiet, but he held my hand, his thumb absently stroking my knuckle. It felt real. It felt like we were winning. I left a trail of absurdity through our home. Post-it notes adorned the bathroom mirror, your beard is winning at life today. Just saying, the fridge, the milk is judging your life choices. Drink water, and his drawing tablet, this machine misses your face. And your hands. But mostly your face. They were corny, they were over the top, and every time I saw him peel one off with a soft, breathy laugh, a real laugh, it felt like another brick removed from the wall around him. The pinnacle of my success came on a Thursday. I'd planned a culinary adventure, which involved attempting to make sushi from a kit, resulting in a kitchen dusted with rice and nori seaweed clinging to the ceiling. We were a mess, laughing as a rogue piece of cucumber shot off the rolling mat and landed on the head of our stoic cat. Bruce was laughing, a full-bellied, genuine laugh that made his eyes shine. He reached over, wiping a smudge of soy sauce from my cheek with his thumb, his touch tender. That was the best day I've had in forever, he said, his voice warm and clear. Thank you. The words should have been a bomb. Instead, they felt like a verdict. I beamed back at him, the perfect, joyful girlfriend. Anything for you, I trilled. But as I turned to start cleaning the catastrophic kitchen, the smile melted from my face like wax. A profound, bone-deep exhaustion washed over me. The stage light inside me was flickering, the bulb hot and strained. I muttered something about needing the bathroom and escaped. I locked the door behind me and slid down to the cool tile floor, my back against the wood. In the silence, the echo of my own forced cheer rang in my ears. I stared at my reflection in the mirror across from me. The woman who looked back had eyes that were a little too wide, a little too bright, like a frightened animal. Her smile lines seemed etched with permanent, frantic energy. He's coming back to life, I thought, the journal phrase echoing in my mind. So why do I feel like I'm the one disappearing? A soft knock on the door made me jump. Celine? Bruce's voice was muffled, concerned. You okay in there? The panic was instant. He couldn't see me like this. He couldn't see the stagehand behind the curtain, sweating and exhausted. The performance had to go on. I scrambled to my feet, splashing cold water on my face, watching the droplets run down like tears I wouldn't allow myself to shed. I practiced the smile in the mirror once, twice, until it looked almost convincing. Just a sec. I called out, my voice pitching high again, a perfect imitation of lightness. I unlocked the door, pulling it open to reveal his worried face. I reached out and squeezed his hand, the Sunbeam once more. All good? Just tidying up. The lie tasted bitter, but I swallowed it down. For him. Always for him. The high from the mini golf and sushi disasters lasted about as long as the glitter I'd once accidentally spilled all over the bathroom. It got everywhere, was impossible to clean up, and weeks later, I was still finding faint, mocking specks of it. The performance was becoming a round-the-clock job, and I was a terrible employee. The constant, buzzing energy I had to manufacture was leaving me hollowed out. My own life, my design projects, my love for quiet documentaries, my simple need for an uninterrupted cup of coffee, felt like a distant memory, a hobby I no longer had time for. The strain showed in small ways. My laugh started to sound a little too sharp, a little brittle. The post-it notes felt less like fun love notes and more like frantic, daily assignments. Be charming. Be spontaneous. Be everything he needs. It all came to a head on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. I'd spent the day wrestling with a client who couldn't decide between eggshell and off-white, and my nerves felt like frayed wires. All I wanted was to put on my softest sweats, order the greasiest pizza known to mankind, and lose myself in a documentary about the architectural history of suspension bridges. It was my version of bliss. I was just shrugging off my work blazer when Bruce emerged from his studio. He had a tentative, hopeful look on his face, the one that used to make my heart soar but now sent a jolt of pure dread through me. It was the look that preceded an adventure. Hey, he said, his voice soft. I was thinking. Let's try that new fusion taco place on Elm Street. You love weird food combinations. It'll be fun. The words hung in the air between us. You love weird food combinations. No, I didn't. The me he knew now did. The me I was pretending to be thought kimchi and pulled pork tacos were a thrilling culinary frontier. The real me, the one buried under layers of performance, thought it sounded like a guaranteed stomachache after a long day. I didn't even look at him. My gaze was fixed on my laptop bag, on the promise of quiet and bridges. The words were out of my mouth before I could stop them, my voice flat and sandpaper rough with exhaustion. Bruce, I just want to order takeout and watch my documentary on urban planning. I don't have the energy for quirky tonight. The moment the word left my lips, the air in the room solidified. I froze, my hand still on the strap of my bag. I could feel the silence, different from the one I'd been fighting. This one was sharp, dangerous, and entirely of my own making. Slowly, I turned to face him. The hopeful light in his eyes had been extinguished, replaced by a dawning, horrible understanding. His face seemed to collapse in on itself. Quirky, he repeated, the word so quiet it was almost a whisper. What does that mean? Is that what all of this has been? A performance? My mind scrambled, a trapped animal looking for an exit. No. That's not what I meant, I stammered, the bright, fake smile twitching back onto my face, a grotesque parody. I just meant, going out. Being on. I'm just tired, honey. It was the wrong thing to say. He took a step back, his shoulders hunching as if I'd struck him. Right, he said, his voice hollow. You're tired. He didn't say another word. He just turned and walked back into his studio, closing the door with a soft, definitive click that was louder than any slam. The fortress walls weren't just back up, they were now impenetrable, and I was the one who had sealed them. The following days were an Arctic chill. The silence returned, but it was worse than before. It was accusatory. He moved through the apartment like a ghost, politely passing me the salt, answering my strained, cheerful questions with monosyllables. My Sunbeam act was useless now, it just bounced off the ice I'd created. Desperate, I tried to backtrack. I suggested the taco place. I put on a stupid cartoon. I left a post-it note on his coffee mug with a badly drawn smiley face. He'd look at them, then look at me, his eyes full of a confused, profound hurt, and my heart would break all over again. The twist came a few days later, born from my own desperation. I was looking for a specific book on color theory, convinced if I could just find the right inspiration, I could design my way out of this mess. I thought it might be on the high shelf in his studio, where he kept some of his older art books. He was out on a walk, a new, solitary habit that felt like a punishment. I saw it almost immediately, a thick, black, unmarked sketchbook tucked away behind a row of heavier volumes. My breath hitched. This wasn't one of his current ones. Maybe it held the key. Maybe it contained sketches from a happier time, a blueprint of the man I was trying to resurrect. A lifeline. I pulled it down, its weight heavy in my hands. I sank onto the floor right there, cross-legged in a patch of sunlight, and opened it. And my world stopped. It was filled with me. But not the me I had been performing. It was the real me. Page after page of stunning, intimate detail. Me, asleep on the couch, a book splayed open on my chest, my mouth slightly agape. Me, staring out the window at the rain, a cup of tea cooling in my hands, a quiet, pensive sadness in my eyes I never knew he saw. Me, biting my lip in concentration as I worked on a floor plan, my brow furrowed. In the margins, in his familiar, messy scrawl, were notes. Not about a quirky, life-saving girlfriend, but about me. The way her nose scrunches when she's thinking. Like a rabbit. Loves the smell of rain on concrete. Calls it petrichor. I looked it up. Her quiet is my favorite sound. Tears blurred my vision. He saw me. The whole time, he saw me. I frantically turned to the last page. The drawing was different, rougher, the lines frantic and dark. It was the two of us, but a heavy, inky cloud was wrapped tightly around Bruce's figure, swallowing him. And I was drawn with bright, frantic, jagged lines, a star drawn with a shaking hand, rays shooting out in every direction, looking less like illumination and more like a chaotic explosion. Underneath, in handwriting so shaky it was barely legible, were the words that shattered me completely. She's trying so hard to save me. I'm breaking her. I don't know how to tell her to stop. A sob ripped from my throat. I dropped the sketchbook as if it had burned me, clapping a hand over my mouth. He knew. He knew the entire time. He didn't need a savior, he needed a partner. And he had been watching me fracture under the weight of a role he never asked me to play, blaming himself for my exhaustion. I sat there on the floor, the truth washing over me in cold, brutal waves. I hadn't been pulling him from the darkness. I had been holding his hand in the gloom, and then I'd let go, because I was too tired to pretend I wasn't in the dark with him. The performance was over. I had just broken the only thing that was ever real between us. For a long time, I didn't move from the floor. The sketchbook lay beside me like an exposed heart, still beating with the truth. The weight of what I'd done, the sheer, arrogant folly of my pact, pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. He hadn't needed a sunbeam. He had needed an anchor. And I'd been so busy trying to be a firework, I'd neglected to be the ground. The sound of the front door opening and closing, the soft shuffle of his footsteps, sent a fresh wave of panic through me. This wasn't a panic I could cover with a smile. It was a cold, clear dread. The performance was over. All that was left was the wreckage, and the terrifying prospect of showing him the real, flawed woman standing in the ruins. I heard him pause in the hallway, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. I quickly wiped my tears with the back of my hand, but there was no hiding the red-rimmed evidence. I stood up, my legs trembling, and picked up the sketchbook. It felt like holding my own soul, naked and accountable. He appeared in the doorway of his studio, his expression guarded, braced for another round of my frantic cheer or the chilly silence we'd been cultivating. His eyes dropped to the sketchbook in my hands, and his face went pale, all the blood draining away in an instant. The hurt in his eyes was so deep it was a physical thing in the room. You weren't supposed to see that, he whispered, his voice ragged. I know, I said, my own voice just as broken. I didn't approach him. The space between us felt sacred, charged with all our unspoken truths. I was looking for a book. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. But I'm so glad I did. I walked to the sofa and sat down, placing the sketchbook on the coffee table between us like a peace offering. I didn't make tea with a whimsical flourish. I just made 2 mugs of plain tea, my movements slow and deliberate. When I held his out to him, he hesitated before crossing the room and taking it, sitting on the far end of the sofa. The distance was a canyon. I took a shaky breath, my gaze fixed on the steam rising from my mug. I couldn't look at him while I did this. The words had to come out into the open air, unvarnished. After your last bad spell, I began, the memory a sharp ache, I felt so helpless. I watched you drowning, and I was just standing on the shore, throwing little pebbles of love at you, and it was doing nothing. So I made a pact with myself. In my journal, I wrote, I will be the sun. I will drag him into the light, even if it burns me. I finally risked a glance at him. His eyes were wide, stunned. I decided I would be the perfect, quirky, life-changing girlfriend. I thought if I was bright enough and loud enough, I could scare the sadness away from you. He was shaking his head, a slow, pained movement. Why, he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. Celine, why? I fell in love with you. The real you. The one who argues with the TV during her documentaries. The one who organizes the spices in alphabetical order and gets genuinely excited about load-bearing walls. I never asked for a cartoon character. A sob escaped me, harsh and unbidden. Because I was terrified. The confession was a floodgate opening. I felt so useless. And being a life raft felt like the only thing I could do. But I was drowning too, trying to be something I'm not. I'm not a sunbeam, Bruce. I'm just me. And I'm so tired. I've been so tired. The silence that followed was different from all the others. It wasn't heavy or sharp. It was spacious. It was the silence of a held breath, of a wound being cleaned. I felt the sofa dip as he moved. He didn't pull me into a hug, he just settled closer, his warmth a solid presence beside me. Then, his hand found mine, his fingers lacing through mine, his thumbs stroking my knuckles with a tenderness that made fresh tears well up. I know, he whispered, his head bowed. I saw you getting tired. I saw the light in your eyes get a little dimmer every time you forced a laugh. And it just made me feel guiltier, which made the darkness feel heavier. It was a terrible, awful cycle. I felt like I was breaking the most beautiful thing in my life, and I was powerless to stop it. His words washed over me, absolving and devastating all at once. He had been a prisoner in his own mind, watching me build my own cage right beside his. What do you need from me? I asked, turning to face him fully, my voice raw and small. The real me. What does the real me do? He looked up then, and his eyes, though still shadowed, were clear for the first time in weeks. He brought our joined hands to his lips and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my knuckles. Just sit with me, he said, his voice firm and sure. You don't have to drag me into the light. Just hold my hand in the dark. That's enough. That's everything. The relief was so profound it was almost a physical sensation, a weight lifting from my chest so suddenly I could finally breathe. We didn't solve his depression that day. There was no magic wand. But we signed a new pact, right there on the sofa, sealed with tears and held hands. A pact of truth. The days that followed were quieter, softer. We didn't go on any adventures. We went on walks. Slow, meandering walks where we didn't talk much, just pointed out an interesting-looking dog or a tree starting to turn. I started working on my designs at the kitchen table while he sat in the living room with his sketchbook. Sometimes he'd draw for 10 minutes. Sometimes he'd just stare out the window. But I was there, and he was there, and the silence was no longer our enemy. It was just silence. The romance was in the real things now. In him learning how I actually took my tea, 1 sugar, a splash of milk, no ridiculous honey and cinnamon concoction, and making it for me without being asked. In me leaving a new, high-quality pen on his desk with a simple note that said, "For when you're ready." No pressure. Just a quiet faith. The final test came on a rainy Sunday. The kind of day that would have sent the old Bruce deeper into his gloom and would have sent the performing me into a frenzy of indoor fort building or impulsive baking. Instead, I was on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, deep into a documentary about the construction of a monumental bridge. The steady narration and the rhythmic patter of rain were a balm. I glanced over at his desk. He was sitting there, his back to me. His shoulders weren't slumped. He was leaning forward, his head bent in concentration. And his hand was moving. A slow, steady, sweeping motion across a fresh page. He was sketching. My breath caught. I didn't say a word. I didn't dare break the spell. I just watched him, this man I loved, not for the brilliant, life-of-the-party cartoonist he could be, but for the quiet, resilient, beautiful man he was, fighting his way back to the surface in his own time, in his own way. He must have felt my gaze. His hand stilled. He didn't turn around with a triumphant shout or a finished masterpiece. He simply slowly swiveled in his chair to face me. He didn't give me the brilliant, saved smile from my manic pixie dreams. He gave me a small, real, slightly weary but utterly genuine smile. It was tentative, like the first green shoot after a long winter, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I smiled back, my own smile feeling natural and easy on my face for the first time in months. No performance. No stage lights. Just me. He turned back to his drawing, and I snuggled deeper into my blanket, turning my attention back to the soaring arches of the bridge on the screen. And for the first time, in a very long time, the quiet didn't feel heavy. It felt like home.